Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. Here, we want to talk to everyone about a particularly mysterious and captivating topic, the hidden secrets of Qin Shi Huang. We're sure most people have heard of Qin Shi Huang. He was the first emperor to unify the 6 states in Chinese history, and is often hailed as the Eternal Emperor. But have you ever wondered? Why was it that among the 7 warring states, Qin, originally the weakest, was able to make a stunning comeback and accomplish the great feat of unifying all of China? Even more puzzling is that for such a monumental historical figure, the historical records about Qin Shi Huang are surprisingly scarce and fragmented. Now, let us unravel these historical mysteries step by step, and share with you some of the untold stories behind Qin Shi Huang. Let's talk about the Warring States period. A time of fierce rivalry among many contenders for power. China was divided among 7 major states: Qin, Qi, Chu, Yan, Han, Zhao, and Wei, collectively known as the 7 Warring States. Each of these states had its own unique strengths. But at the beginning, Qin was clearly the weakest of them all. Let's first look at Qin's situation. In terms of territory, Chu practically occupied half of what was then China, with a landmass several times larger than Qin's. In terms of wealth, Qi was fabulously rich, with unmatched economic power. In terms of military strength, Wei dominated the early Warring States period, and often crushed Qin in battle. As for political status, the other 6 states were mostly related to the royal Zhou lineage. They were, in a sense, imperial relatives. Meanwhile, Qin's ancestors were mere horse breeders for the Zhou kings, and the state was so low in status that other nobles looked down on it. And yet, this seemingly insignificant state of Qin ultimately achieved the impossible, unifying all of China. That's nothing short of a miracle, right? Some of you might say, isn't that because of the Shang Yang reforms? Indeed, the Shang Yang reforms were a crucial turning point. Through a series of sweeping reforms, Shang Yang dramatically improved Qin's military and economic efficiency. For example, he implemented a system of military merit ranks to reward battlefield contributions. And he reformed agricultural policy, offering rewards for farming, which boosted food production significantly. These changes helped Qin gradually grow from a weak state into a formidable power. But here's the problem: Qin wasn't the only one enacting reforms. During the Warring States period, other states also tried to implement reforms. For instance, Li Kuei, the founder of legalism, had already carried out reforms in Wei. In fact, many of Shang Yang's ideas were borrowed from earlier reformers. However, most of these reform attempts in other states failed midway, mainly due to resistance from the nobility. The nobles felt their interests were being threatened. So, naturally, they opposed change. Even in Qin, reforms didn't go smoothly. Shang Yang himself offended too many people and was ultimately executed. So, explaining Qin's rise solely through the Shang Yang reforms is clearly insufficient. For Qin to rise from the weakest state to the empire that unified China, there had to be deeper reasons. To uncover them, let's turn to the research of a remarkable historian, Professor Zhang Guangyuan. He's an expert in Qin and Han Dynasty history, and his unique method is applying detective-style reasoning, just like a Sherlock Holmes of historical studies. By piecing together the tiniest historical clues, he uncovered a stunning secret about Qin Shi Huang. A secret that could completely overturn the way most people view this legendary emperor. Through meticulous research, Professor Zhang discovered that although Qin Shi Huang is known as the Eternal Emperor, the historical records about him are shockingly sparse. Especially when it comes to his personal life, which seems to have been deliberately erased. For instance, Qin Shi Huang reportedly had more than 20 children, which is not unusual for an emperor in ancient times. But there is absolutely no record of his Empress in historical documents. Isn't that strange? How could an emperor with so many children leave behind no trace of who his Empress was? Could it be that someone intentionally erased this information from history? Here's another example. Qin Shi Huang's eldest son, Fusu, was known to be a wise and benevolent prince. And many believed he would have made a great emperor one day. But later, the powerful court official Zhao Gao forged an imperial edict, ordering Fusu to commit suicide. And Fusu obeyed without question. This completely defies logic. Why would someone so intelligent so readily accept a suspicious decree? And there's something even more puzzling. When Chen Sheng and Wu Guang launched their famous uprising, they did so under the banner of oppose Qin and restore Chu. And they invoked the names of two figures. One was Shang Yang, a renowned general of Chu. That makes sense, since they aimed to restore the Chu state. But the other was Fusu, the prince of Qin. That's incredibly confusing. Why would a rebel army against Qin rally under the name of a Qin royal prince? What secrets lie behind this contradiction? To unravel these mysteries, we need to start with the generation before Qin Shi Huang, and gradually peel back the layers like a detective. Let's begin with Qin Shi Huang's father, Yongle. Yongle was a prince of the Qin state. But his fate was far from fortunate. He was sent to the state of Zhao as a political hostage, where he lived in extreme hardship. At that time, Zhao and Qin were enemies. And Yongle, as a hostage, lived a very miserable life. Then came a turning point, when a merchant named Lu Buwei entered the picture. Lu Buwei was a shrewd businessman who saw potential in this fallen prince. He believed Yongle might one day achieve great things. So he began sponsoring Yongle. Not only giving him money, but also helping him build a reputation among the nobility. Even more astonishing, Lu Buwei gave his own concubine, Lady Zhao, to Yongle. Later, Lady Zhao gave birth to Yongle, the boy who would eventually become Qin Shi Huang. At that time, Yongle was a nobody. At best, the son of a struggling prince. Who would have imagined that this child would one day unify all of China? Even more remarkably, Lu Buwei, through a series of political maneuvers, helped Yongle secure the right to inherit the Qin throne. How did he pull it off? First, Lu Buwei approached a key figure, Lady Huang, the favorite consort of Yongle's father, King Xiaowen of Qin. She had no children of her own. Lu Buwei lavishly bribed her and said, "You are favored now, but what about in old age? If you adopt Yongle as your son, then if he becomes king, you will have powerful backing for life." Lady Huang agreed, and persuaded King Xiaowen to name Yongle as his heir. But things moved much faster than anyone expected. King Xiaowen of Qin was king for only 3 days before passing away. And soon after, Yongle successfully became the king of Qin. But just 3 years later, Yongle also died. Thus, 13-year-old Yongle ascended the throne as the new king of Qin. The whole sequence of events felt as if it were being guided by an invisible hand, truly dramatic. But the story was just beginning. After Yongle's accession, he wasn't greeted with flowers and applause. Instead, he faced a complex web of political power struggles. His mother, Lady Zhao, became the Empress Dowager. And her story was practically a real-life version of From Rags to Royalty. Originally just an ordinary songstress, she had now become the most powerful woman in Qin. But problems quickly arose. Her husband had just died, her son Yongle was only 13. And real power was in the hands of the chancellor, Lu Buwei. Lu Buwei, who had once been romantically involved with Lady Zhao, was now preoccupied with state affairs. He also worried that as Yongle grew older, he might uncover Lu's past relationship with his mother, which could jeopardize Lu's political standing. So he began deliberately distancing himself from Lady Zhao. At this point, Lady Zhao felt increasingly insecure. Although she held the title of Empress Dowager, her grip on power was not solid. To make matters worse, there was a potential threat. Yingzhang's half-brother, Cheng Jiao. Cheng Jiao was the younger brother of Qin Shi Huang. But historical records mention very little about him, except for two striking events. The first, at the age of 15, Cheng Jiao was sent on a diplomatic mission to the state of Han. And with just his eloquence, he convinced Han to cede 100 li, about 50 kilometers, of land to Qin. A brilliant display of diplomatic genius. The second event was a complete reversal. Later, when leading an army to attack Zhao, Cheng Jiao defected and surrendered to Zhao. This drastic shift from prodigy to traitor raises serious questions. What really happened behind the scenes? To understand this, we need to look at Cheng Jiao's background. His mother was Lady Han, a princess from the state of Han, which gave him a much stronger background than Lady Zhao. It's highly likely that Lady Han used her royal connections to help Cheng Jiao negotiate the land deal with Han. Not just for Qin's benefit, but to boost Cheng Jiao's prestige and increase his eligibility for the throne. But once Yingzheng became king, Cheng Jiao became a threat. In royal families, ruthlessness is the rule. And to solidify his power, Yingzheng had to eliminate any risks. Cheng Jiao may have sensed the danger, and thus, when leading troops to attack Zhao, chose to defect. On the surface, it looked like his personal decision. But there may have been a larger conspiracy behind it. So, who orchestrated this conspiracy? Yingzheng was just 13 at the time. Unlikely to have masterminded such a complex scheme. The most suspicious figure was Lady Zhao. Although she was the Empress Dowager, she needed allies to secure her own power. With Lu Buwei having distanced himself from her, who could she still trust? At this critical moment, a key figure appeared, Lao Ai. Many assume Lao Ai was just Lady Zhao's boy toy. But the truth is far more complex. According to historical records, Lao Ai not only had his own mansion and fief, but also had a large group of followers. When his rebellion failed, over 4,000 people were implicated and executed. Which clearly shows Lao Ai was not just a plaything, but a serious political force. Even more telling, Lao Ai was granted the title Marquis of Changxin after the Shang Yang reforms. Titles in Qin could only be awarded for military achievements. But oddly, the records say nothing about any of Lao Ai's military exploits. That's highly suspicious. Therefore, Professor Zhang Guangyuan speculates that Lao Ai's military merits may have been tied to Cheng Jiao's downfall. To protect her own position and her son Yingzheng, Lady Zhao may have instructed Lao Ai to eliminate Cheng Jiao. But such internal royal conflicts were too sensitive. Exposing them would have tarnished Qin's image. So Lao Ai's contributions were deliberately concealed. And the only person powerful enough to erase these records later was none other than Qin Shi Huang himself. Through the Cheng Jiao incident, we can see that the internal power struggles in Qin were, in essence, a battle between rival foreign clans. Lady Zhao, Lu Buwei, and Lao Ai were all from the state of Zhao, representing the Zhao faction within Qin. Whereas Cheng Jiao and Lady Han were part of the Han faction. When Lady Zhao used Lao Ai to eliminate Cheng Jiao, it was essentially a victory of the Zhao faction over the Han faction. But that was just the beginning of the story. As Qin Shi Huang grew older, the threats he faced extended beyond the Han faction. He also had to contend with the Zhao faction, and an even greater threat, the Chu faction. According to some historical sources, Qin and Chu had a marriage alliance that lasted over 300 years. For example, Lady Huang was a princess from Chu. But strangely, after Lady Huang, All traces of Chu influence in Qin suddenly vanish, as if they had been deliberately erased. Professor Zhang Guangyuan discovered that this may have had something to do with a man named Lord Chongping, Chongping Jun. Lord Chongping had a complicated identity. He was the son of the king of Chu, the nephew of Lady Huang, and the maternal cousin of Qin Shi Huang. He even served as Chancellor of Qin. Most importantly, he was later proclaimed King of Chu by the rebel army of Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, suggesting that he was held in high regard by the people of Chu. However, Lord Chongping's existence is barely mentioned in historical records, as though he had been deliberately written out. Why? Professor Zhang offers a bold theory. It may be related to the identity of Qin Shi Huang's Empress. With over 20 children, it is unlikely that Qin Shi Huang had no Empress. Yet there is absolutely no record of her. The only plausible explanation is that the Empress was from Chu, possibly Lord Chongping's sister. To completely eliminate the Chu faction, Qin Shi Huang not only removed Lord Chongping, but also erased his own Empress, his wife and the mother of his children, from history. Now let's talk about the tragedy of Fusu. Why did he so easily believe Zhao Gao's forged imperial edict and choose to take his own life? Professor Zhang offers another daring hypothesis. Fusu's mother was likely the erased Chu Empress. To fully wipe out Chu influence, Qin Shi Huang eliminated Lord Chongping, his own wife, and even distanced himself from their son, Fusu. Fusu was sent to the frontier, and may have long harbored resentment toward his father. When he received the fake decree, he may have already been disheartened, feeling he had no hope left in life. This also explains why, during the uprising led by Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, Fusu's name was used as a rallying symbol. Because his mother was from Chu, Fusu carried Chu blood, and symbolized the Chu faction oppressed by Qin Shi Huang. To the rebel army, Fusu was the perfect figurehead. Another mystery is the rebellion of Lao Ai. Historical records state that Lao Ai launched a revolt in Xianyang when Qin Shi Huang was 22 years old, at the time of his coming-of-age ceremony. But both Qin Shi Huang and Lu Buwei were in Yongcheng at the time. So why would Lao Ai choose to start a rebellion in Xianyang? Clearly, it wasn't directly aimed at Qin Shi Huang. Professor Zhang speculates that the true target of Lao Ai's rebellion was likely the Chu faction, represented by Lord Chongping and Lady Huang. Lady Zhao and Lao Ai may have seen this as an opportunity to eliminate Chu's influence entirely, so that the Zhao faction could dominate Qin's court. Unfortunately for them, Lao Ai's rebellion failed. He was executed, and Lady Zhao's 2 children were also dealt with by Qin Shi Huang. More significantly, Qin Shi Huang used this opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He purged both Lao Ai and Lady Zhao's Zhao faction, and removed the Chu faction represented by Lord Chongping and the Empress. Even Lu Buwei was implicated, and ultimately committed suicide. From that point on, all the foreign consort clans within Qin, Han, Zhao, and Chu were completely eliminated by Qin Shi Huang. Why did Qin Shi Huang want to erase this history? The answer is simple: to ensure imperial stability and national unification. If foreign consort factions weren't removed, they might resist Qin's conquests in order to protect their own native states. For instance, people from Han might not want Qin to destroy Han. Those from Chu might resist Qin's conquest of Chu. Once such sentiments infiltrated the central government, Qin Shi Huang's grand mission of unification would become far more difficult. So, Qin Shi Huang not only eliminated these factions, but also erased all relevant records from official history. That's why his Empress, Lord Chongping, the tragedy of Fusu, and even Lao Ai's true accomplishments, all became unspoken secrets, buried for centuries. This is a true reflection of the saying, "The imperial house is the most merciless." For the sake of power and unification, Qin Shi Huang spared not even his own family. According to many historians, Qin Shi Huang was not only a brilliant military strategist and an exceptional statesman, but also a ruthless master of political maneuvering, who understood exactly how to remove threats and consolidate absolute power. Through a series of cold and precise actions, he decisively eliminated all potential forces that could threaten Qin's unification, laying a solid foundation for a centralized, unified empire. However, behind this dazzling achievement lay a tremendous price. His empress was completely erased from history. His eldest son Fusu died in unjust despair. His mother Lady Zhao lived out her later years in loneliness and sorrow. What was once family was torn apart in the vortex of power. These long-buried secrets remained hidden for over 2,000 years, only now beginning to emerge from the depths of history. Perhaps this is the true nature of the dual life of the eternal emperor. Glorious in triumph, but also profoundly tragic and costly. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.